The topic for this first session is the importance of focusing on the quality and structure of your data before you start going down the path of actually looking at selecting technology. So, Stuart, can you kick us off here? Why should companies consider data governance and data quality when they're looking at MDM and PIM?
So there are two angles to this, I think, and the first one I'll take is let's forget about the labels of governance and quality for a minute, and just think about what the organisation that's going down a PIM or an MDM solution route, what they're trying to achieve, what is a successful MDM project. There'll always be a specific business case driven by specific business reasons, but in general, if you put in a PIM or an MDM in place, it's to get better control over your data. And it's to get better control over your data after you go live. We're not talking about project success where, yes, the project is on time and to budget. That is very, very important. But what is the real success of an MDM project? It's making sure that for ever and a day after go live, your data is trustworthy, it's clean, your processes are efficient, etc., etc. So to get to there, what do they do? What do companies do in the project? One of the things they've got to do is decide what data they want in the system and what attributes there's got to be, what validity rules they've got want to apply, what good data looks like in their target system. And what you tend to do on a project to get to that position is you bring a whole lot of experts in, people who are from across the business, different disciplines, to have a good old chat, document a whole lot of stuff and say, right, this is what good looks like at the point of go live. Brilliant. You've got the experts talking about data. Sometimes, often, it's people who they've never met each other before. They just work in disparate parts, different silos. So you've got this set of people together. Wouldn't it be great if after go live, when you train to get your benefits, that these people stuck together as a group and had these conversations and maybe signed off data changes, or at least were consulted when things that are different from the point of go live are pushed through. And once they've made all these decisions, you'll bring in a team and people again from across the business who will cleanse the data. They'll decide on what's got to happen with the data that's coming from the old system that you put in your shiny new system, and you don't want to fill your shiny new system full of rubbish data. So you get these experts together in the nitty gritty of the data, and they do all this cleansing. They have these conversations. They build some tools maybe, and they pass over a set of beautiful data for go live. Wouldn't it be great if those people stayed together? Who the data for go live, potentially using the technology that they've just built. And there are things that are happening in the project anyway. They've got to happen. And my dog's here, by the way. the data dog. These are things that have got to happen when we're doing the project anyway. And what you're really doing is you're setting up mini governance and mini data quality teams just for that reason, just for that project reason. And the trick is to make that not a transient activity. If you can start proving some value, so be bold and wave flags saying, when we started the project, this piece of data was this bad, and look at how good it is now. And we've done that by putting in these 2 sets of people, these 3 sets of people, these 100 people to make those decisions and to clean the data. We don't actually need all those people going forward, but wouldn't it be great if, as we were driving the benefits out of this project, we drove more and more and more and more just by using the same practices. So, and that's one of the things that I certainly see in Comma in general, we see our data migration approach, our data governance approach, our PIM implementation or MDM implementation approach. They're full of little components. And something that's constant across all of that is the data quality component. If we're doing a data quality exercise, we do exactly the same as if we're doing a data migration that needs a bit of data quality. if we're doing a PIM implementation and it needs a bit of data quality. It's the same activities using good practice, just put into different scenarios.
So looking at some of the pitfalls, I know we said that's one of the things we'd look at, is do you think sometimes companies think technology is going to solve all their problems, so that's what they look at to start with and don't think about their data to begin with? I don't know if anyone wants to pick, I'm asking Stuart, but if anyone else wants to jump in, is that something you think that is a pitfall in some of these projects that we see?
Yeah, I mean, systems can do so much, can't they? I mean, yeah, with the PIM and an MDM, you've got workflow, you've got rules you can build in business rules, you can build some data quality rules, dashboards, all good things that can help maintain things at a certain level and assist, but that doesn't replace kind of good governance. And also, when you go live, you'll think you've got the whole picture, but actually things will evolve. So as you start working with a new system, things change. You realize things that maybe actually didn't factor in, or things that actually you could do to further improve things. And by having, as Stuart said, if you get the right people involved during the project and keep those people in place and make sure that during that stage of the project that it's business led, not IT led, those guys take ownership for that data, and then hopefully they'll continue then and they'll help things evolve and they'll help in all manner of things moving forward, in terms of change requests, system wise, data wise. And yeah, you'll start to be able to make better use of your data and be able to push it downstream with more confidence, and reduce the need for extra manual handling further downstream, which is quite common in a lot of organisations.
I know Scott. I've heard Scott use an amazing phrase before as well. Where it was on another call we had or another thing we did, where Scott, you said, I think it's just buying a new frying pan doesn't make you a better cook.
I was going to say, actually, a lot of people misconception is that if you just get the tool, it's going to fix the data, or as I might suggest, just buying a frying pan doesn't make you a better cook. So yeah, right along that. But what struck me about what Stuart was talking about is really the people focus of this exercise, that while tools are important to enable it, you've got to get the people and the cultural side aligned around the change in behavior that's required to just get better data at the source early in the process to feed all these other enabling activities. And what also struck me is, and I mean this in the highest compliment, Stuart, that what you just suggested, you could have suggested 5 years ago, or today, or 10 years from now, because these kinds of things are really needed regardless of whatever the current trend is, whatever the hottest technology is, whatever the focus of enterprises are at this moment. And we can spew off all the buzzwords and the kind of trends. But this kind of activity is, if I can share this term, it's macro trend agnostic. No matter what happened before, no matter what's happening now, no matter what's going to happen in the future, you're still going to need this data governance group. You're still going to need this cultural focus on getting better data throughout the organization.
On the pitfall side, we get asked quite a lot to take the accountability to go in and cleanse data. So could you come in and cleanse our data for us? Well, we can put processes and we can put tools in place to assist you in cleansing your data, because actually, unless it's a very well-defined piece of legislation or a very well-defined data model, us as external people don't actually know what good data looks like for you. And it's often the case where organizations expect consultancies to be able to come in and just fix the data. No, we've got to spend time with your people. We've got to talk. We've got to understand the nuances. And yeah, pitfall is not putting enough people on the client side relative to us in place to do the data cleansing.
Or just approaching it that way as this tactical, ad hoc, single, initiative project that says, let's just get the data clean, then we don't need those consultants anymore. We're going to move on, and now we've got clean data. To continue on my analogy, and the risk of getting my poetic license revoked, if you give them, they're asking you to come in and cook them a meal with their new frying pan. You cook it, they eat it, A couple days later, they call up and go, I'm hungry again. Well, we want to teach you how to cook. That's the point. We want to make sure that your culture is focused on understanding that true core strategic value of having this kind of foundational data across your enterprise.
I think the one thing a PIM or an MDM implementation does give you is it's an opportunity. So the one thing that it does potentially give you is it's opening that door to things that, like you said, Scott, have probably existed for years, but there hasn't necessarily been a big enough window. So people have just kind of lived with things, and they've lived with still rechecking data, changing data, passing data back. The one thing the PIM MDM, if you set up right for the project, is you can start to eradicate some of those and start to focus on value add activities, because that's the big benefit of the data governance bit. Might be a small element of people's roles that they've now got to fulfill, but it should be part of the role anyway. And actually what it hopefully does is allow the opportunity that maybe that 20% of your role where you were cleansing somebody else's data or having to pass it back, etc., that's now eliminated. You can now focus on what's key to the business.
Cool, thank you all. No, I think that all makes sense, and I think it's I think in summary, if I was going to take anything away from this first session we're going through now, is that really, technology can be the big shiny thing that you look at and it looks like it's going to solve all the problems, but actually I think the thing to kind of wrap, what Scott was saying about what Stuart said, is it's embracing not just the technology, but it's the processes within the business, it's the people within the business, it's forming these teams and forming that understanding of, okay, this is where we want to get to, this is our objective, and we need to do all this before we even look at technology. Like to you, Scott, I think that's a perfect way of saying it. Let's learn to cook first before we buy the new frying pan and spend the money on the new frying pan. I think that's probably a good way to summarize everything we've just said.
I'm not going to look at our new frying pan that we bought the other week the same ever again.
And if anybody's got anything else to add to this session, I think we've covered all the good stuff. Stuart, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to wrap up or summarise.
I was going to say something about because one of the common pitfalls is that people forget about the data quality side, and it does make projects late. So you can set up for this technical implementation, but if you've not got people preparing your data to go into it from day one, really, then you run the risk of having all your technical guys sat around twiddling the thumbs whilst the business is catching up, making sure the data will actually go in. But that comes down to data migration strategy. Reflecting back, I could have said that 5 years ago. I was saying that 20 years ago. But some companies do it well. Other companies just go, well, it's fine. We'll just fill in some spreadsheets and we'll be fine. We'll load it in the last few weeks. We'll be fine. It pays dividends to look at your data migration, your data quality activities early on in the project, even if they do turn out to be easy.
Yeah,
just make sure that they are. And if they're very tricky, don't be afraid of investing in them, because if your outcomes are better data and you want your data to be controlled, then what you're putting in has got to be good in the first place. Unless, and I do take this, some companies who are buying a PIM system or an MDM system, they will see that as the opportunity to clean. So you're taking all your rubbish data, as long as it just loads, and then you run a program of activities after you've gone live to clean your data down. That's a perfectly valid way of doing it, as long as that is your strategy and your planned approach. You don't want to get right to the end and then load a whole lot of rubbish, and then your project team disbands and you've got a beautiful system full of rubbish.
I mean, is there the case that in those instances where people or companies aren't aware of how bad the quality of their data is until they put it into a system, or
There is a danger sometimes. I have seen it where companies have gone live with a system and that they're like, well, we'll fix the data as we come to it. But the problem is they put great workflow maybe in place, some data quality rules, some built-in business rules, and then all their products start failing, and they start failing to approve through the workflow. And suddenly they start circumnavigating things, and you start ending up back into a spiral. So I think to Stuart's point, as long as you've got a plan, there's got to be a plan of action that how you're going to correct and clean that data, and then keep it clean.
We've both been on projects that the sole focus of that project is to turn off the workflow for a while, clean the data up, and then turn the workflow back on. So they've invested all this money in getting this beautiful workflow in place, and then it's just thrown away because it doesn't work. Yeah. And it reflects badly on all data projects. So, you put this shiny new thing in, but it stopped me from doing my work. It's rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah. I think one of the pitfalls is around kind of some of the vocabulary people even use to prepare and manage this data. So not to pick on it too much. Yes, we need to clean data, but we also need to structure it, which isn't always a cleansing exercise. What are the hierarchies? What are the taxonomies? Do we have the geographies right? Those things drive so much reporting that if you're waiting until later when you go live to fix your customer hierarchies or your vendor hierarchies, you're going to have a business person looking at reports that they do not trust. And that's a lot more work to get them to trust it later than doing that work early on, because you don't get a lot of chances to rebuild that trust with the business side when you bring out your new system or your new initiative. They are probably, looking slightly askance anyway, because if you've been in business long enough, you've been through plenty of these, new launches of a next system. So it's critical. Cleanliness is important, but structuring, I'd even suggest, is, as if not even more important around hierarchies, taxonomies, and those kind of elements.
It's interesting sometimes in a lot of organizations that the people in the more senior positions, and I've had it quoted at me where people have said, yes, I get all the data I need about my people, I could run all these different reports, and then you're going to have a workshop with the people who produce those reports, and they spend every month running around like crazy, fixing data, pulling data together from multiple sources, checking it with people, actually picking up the phone, having to check details of people to produce a report so that they can take it to a board. But there's no awareness at the top that the legs are paddling. They just see swans. They don't see the frantic paddling underneath.
Early on in my career, I was selling to a sales organization, and I actually put a cartoon about this in my book. The guy at the front of the room, he was the head of sales. He goes, Scott, we can slice and dice our data any way we want to. All I have to do is push a button. And this very courageous sales ops analyst at the end of the table stood up and he said, sir, I'm the button. And that's what people, to your point, Dad, the button is behind the scenes, right? You push that button, there's all kind of pain going on in the data management part of the organization, making sure that quarterly report is correct, or the way that executive wants to see it. It's a lot of work of that paddling underwater without seeing what's happening. So it's a common problem, common issue.
Good analogy. Yeah.
It is. And I think this. Go on, sorry, Dan.
I was going to say one last thing as well in terms of, I think either Stuart or Scott made the point of sometimes the terminology can frighten people off. And and some of the when you speak about governance and working groups and some companies can get kind of a bit anxious about that. Some of these things can be done more informally, depending on the size of the organization, the complexity. Some of these things can be tag-ons to other forums, other meetings. They can form part of what's already there. You don't need necessarily to create a whole industry, and that's commonly, I think, misunderstood as well, that they think they need to set up a whole new hierarchy of stuff. Sometimes that's absolutely relevant, but sometimes I think you can tag it on with other things.
It seems like I make a point every time I speak to you, Scott, about mentioning someone else's book. But Robert Siner's Non-Invasive Data Governance is all about that, Dan. It's all about, well, not all about, but one of the tenets is use what you've got, use what's relevant, use what people are happy. Don't just come in and do something completely different in scary words. Yeah. And we do also often get hung up with governance, especially. Governance is a scary word.
Well, this is all. I think this all leads quite nicely on to the second session we're going to hold on this topic, because what we're going to do on our next session is talk about which obviously talking about Scott's book is he's literally written the book on it, but is about telling stories and getting buy-in from around the business on, you know, when you're going on a journey to implement an MDM solution or a PIM solution, is how you get that buy-in from across the business. And I think some of those things, like making people understand what's going to be the end result, you know, understanding what tangible benefits they're going to get from it, those kind of stories that you can tell to get that buy-in, is something we'll cover on the next session. So I think, gents, if we wrap up this session, and thanks for everyone for listening, hope you've enjoyed it and hope it's been useful, and if you join us for the next session, as I said, you'll hear from Scott, Stuart and Dan on how to tell the stories and get buy-in from across the business on your project. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, guys.